honestly, I don't really know if what I'm saying now is true, just because John Goldsmith, who's a professor in linguistics here, and who's amazing, pretty unambiguously the best person in the department, fairly famous in his ones he's worked in, really cool guy, is also a megalomaniac. And so about a quarter of our lectures we're talking about theories that he personally done and why everyone else who worked on them was dumb. And so like I've since had this verified that yes, he actually is really important, but at the same time he's kind of got a hilarious ego. And so since he's said that this is his pet project, I don't really know if when he said it's like the future of linguistics and that's where he's going is true or if that's just him being insane. But the kind of next big paradigm is information minimalization, which is basically you look at everything that you have to encode in your head for language in terms of units of information. There are ways you can encode this numerically, basically just fewest neural connections, fewest bits if you have to encode it on a computer, something like that. And just the thing that will actually happen, the thing that will continue to exist in the language is the fewest bits of information that can effectively socially communicate what you intend to communicate. The fewest bits of information that can allow you to replicate a sound. And the reason this fits pretty well with what we've already seen is like, so you can either encode every word 40 times, depending on the words that come before and after it that could influence a pronunciation, or you can code it quasi-phonemically and just have the loose outline of the pronunciation and then have a whole lot of rules that describe how these things interact with you. And obviously, if you have a vocabulary of 40 or 50 or 60,000 words and a few hundred rules, it's a lot more efficient to encode things using rules than otherwise. And this shows up in a hell of a lot of other places, syntax. There's also porting sounds between languages. It's just all about how to not use weird shit. Because, like this basic information theory as taught by Goldsmith, the less frequent a sound or linguistic phenomenon is, typically the more complexly it will be encoded. And so the more you use sounds that are not common to your language, the more you use syntactic structures that are not common to your language, the more information you have, the better a reason you have to do that, and the less likely you are to do it. So that's where things are supposed to be going. That's where you get a lot of fun computer modeling stuff that I think is really cool. People I can take some classes in, but I'm not yet. And so that's the end of the talk. Do any of you guys have questions?
Do you know at all like when people started to codify like these different sounds and languages and started to like break down exactly how all of this worked? Like when
it was systematized and started to be really looked at as like within this sort of genre of science between the 1880s and 19-teens. That's when phonology developed. That's when people started like trying to figure out how this stuff all worked. When it was inventory, when people just sort of like started listening to sounds really carefully, that actually happened way the hell earlier for reconstructed Hebrew and even like before it became a big nationalist project and all that, and Aramaic and biblical languages, as well as scriptural languages, even other traditions. Well, like linguistics, basically, you got people trying to figure out the perfect way to use the classical language that's mostly died. So reconstruction stuff, that's been around since at least like the birth of universities in the 1200s, and probably well before that. This led to historical linguistics, which is how can we reconstruct what happened in between this perfect linguistic world in the past and now, and figure out what Old English looks like and all that. And then people started being like, oh wait, maybe this will work to theorize everything. And then somewhere around the turn of the century, linguistics actually showed up. Incidentally, the first linguistics department in the world is here. Although there were some people who were pretty definitely linguists in Germany as well. But, earlier until then, were just the first people who make it a community. So, yeah.
My question is going back to I guess the phonetics part of it, and you touched on this a little bit, but how does like the diagram you have on the top of the board and the chart you were drawing at the beginning, what is that? What are the implications of that on how we learn a language? Because when you're trying to teach a little kid to say a word, you don't say, okay, put your tongue back and, open the flap down there and cut the air off abruptly. You just say bed, 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 and eventually they just start saying bed. Yeah, that's basically my question. Like, how do we translate? Because it's like this is all going on subconsciously. How is it that, if that's what the sound is, how do we translate that to, like, how do we learn? How do we learn this? This is all.
Two-part answer. The first part is you look at linguistic development psychology people, and it's pretty agreed upon that if you put a kid in a room with a tape and let them watch TV news and gave them no other exposure to the outside world and just fed them, they'd be emotionally completely fucked up if they'd speak fluent English. Giving counterexamples, saying like, no, you don't say it that way, you say it this way, and that kind of thing is kind of useful after a certain point when the kid's fairly old, but it's not anywhere near as useful as just hearing a lot of the language. But that's mostly for syntax and vocabulary and that kind of thing. For sounds, that all happens before you can communicate. So you can't tell a little kid how to say bed, because if you're telling them how to say it, then they are not interpreting the words that are coming out of your mouth, and so your instructions are useless. Obviously, as for adult language learners, usually you either make analogies to the existing language or teach them some kind of like basic phonetics to do this. But from what I've heard, very basic dev psych, if you've taken more on this and want to explain more, then what I've heard is basically when you're a little kid, you start hearing sounds of language, you start trying to replicate them, and you just make noise. And basically that's going to be distributed over everything that could possibly appear on this chart and vowels, and you just make sounds that you can make with your head. Gradually, over a few months, I think usually about 6 months in, you've restricted the sounds that you make by trial and error entirely to the sounds that you hear. And so you've replicated the accent of the languages that are being spoken around you. This is why a lot of people want to hire French au pairs, is because if someone's speaking French around you and then your parents are speaking to you in English, then even if you don't learn French for a few years, your pronunciation will be absolutely perfect because you'll have completely internalized how to pronounce those sounds. And if you relearn them, like it's totally possible to relearn how to pronounce any sound, but it's really a lot harder to become fluent in using those sounds if you didn't pick it up and internalize it. It's just like basic thing that you do with your head. So yeah, just how you do that is completely baby's trial and error.